Welcome to Small Spark Theory. This podcast is designed as a collection of thoughts, ideas, and practical tips on using marginal gains to help your agency new business endeavours. Small Spark Theory is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann of Gunpowder Consulting. Welcome back to Small Spark Theory. Merry Christmas, everyone. I'm here back in Studio Narnia. We're not at White City Place this month, but I'm here with our producer extraordinaire, Isabel Jarvis.
Hello.
Hi, Izzy. It's the two of us here this time, and we're bringing you our Christmas special. Picture the scene. We're in Christmas jumpers. There are mince pies. There are chocolate coins. And I'm pretty sure that before the end of this recording, there's going to be Prosecco as well.
I hope so.
Yeah, there needs to be. We've got a lot to get through, so I think we're going to need it. We decided, as a little Christmas gift to you, that we would package up some of the best pieces of advice that our contributors have shared with us from across the series. So that's from the full 2 years of Small Spark Theory. We've handpicked some of our favourites.
2 years.
I know. I can't believe we're still getting away with it.
Still allowed to do it.
And people keep coming back for more, which reminds me, we've had quite a few people email in. And at the end of this year, we had the lovely Nick Phipps who came to join us. I persuaded him to join us because he happened to email and say that he liked the podcast. So we roped him in. So if anyone's listening that has an idea about a subject that we haven't covered or a guest that they think that we should invite, get in touch. You can reach us on Twitter at Gunpowder Tweets, or you can email us at Lucy or Isabel at gunpowderconsulting.com. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Anyway, on with the show.
Lucy, tell us your best piece of advice you've been given.
So about 20 years ago now, I was given this brilliant piece of advice by somebody who'd been told this by his mentor at the time. And it was that if you're going to be in the room, to be in the room. And he explained this to me as, if you're in a meeting, focus on that meeting. If you're working on a particular piece of work, focus on that. And it was all about focus. And that seemed like a really new concept to me. But it's really interesting that all these years later, it's so much more relevant now than it was then, because back then, I mean, we'd got mobile phones, but they were just for
not
making
calls.
Though,
no emails, no messages. Messages, but not.
Yeah, exactly. And now, I mean, I was in a meeting last week where every person that came to the meeting, there were 8 people in the meeting, everybody came to that meeting with a laptop. And they all had their laptops open. Now, how hard is it to stop looking at your email, the messages that are coming through, the Slack, there's all these things going on. But that really simple advice, just if you're going to be in the room, to be in the room, i.e., they call it, it's very mindful, I guess, now. And it's about being present, and it's called lots of other things now. But as somebody who's quite easily distracted, she says, looking at a mince pie again, that's really good advice for me. So that's really stuck with me. But let's crack on,
Lucy,
shall we?
Lucy, why are you looking at your phone right now? Stop texting.
Shush, it's a podcast, they don't know. Okay, let's start, I think, with Felix Velarde, who is a brilliant roving agency non-exec who's been helping lots of agencies with their growth planning, and he joined us in a couple of episodes.
He did.
He came along to the live show.
He did.
And we've also got Hilary Gallo, who is the brilliant negotiation expert who joined us back in the first year. So we've got 2 bits of advice which are actually 2 sides of the same piece of advice.
They really are.
In a
really
way.
are.
So we're going to start with Felix, and then you'll hear what Hilary has to say.
I once subscribed to Harvard Business Review, and they used to send you a red book at the beginning of your subscription, and it gave you 10 top tips in business. And the first piece of advice was, don't let somebody coming to you for advice put their monkey on your back. And what that really meant was everybody who reports to you will come to you because you're the boss, you're the person with the vision, you're the person who's got the expertise, you set it up. And they don't want to get it wrong. So they'll come to you and say, boss, I've got this problem. How do you want me to solve it? If you can train yourself to say, I don't know, what do you think? Eventually they'll start coming to you and saying, boss, I've got this challenge or this problem. I've got 2 different solutions I think might work. Which one do you think will work best? I don't know, what do you think? It's the best comeback to that. They will have thought about it, and they will say, well, I think option A. Your job then is to say, great, try it. Report back to me in a week, or tell me when it's finished, or tell me when it's succeeded or failed. There's no shame in failure. The more you fail, the more you learn, and the quicker we as a business will learn how to do it properly. So that single piece of advice of delegate responsibility. Don't just delegate by handing people tasks. If you delegate by responsibility, they'll start delegating responsibilities, and actually then you get a really high-performing team, and you won't get problems coming to you apart from the mission-critical ones, and it'll release you to work on the business rather than in the business.
I'd like to know, what's the best piece of advice that you've been given that's really stuck with you?
Well, it's a really weird thing. I was in a place called Anderson Consulting. It became Accenture. And I was trying to make partner in this organisation. This was like, I don't know, aeons ago. And my boss at the time called me into his office to give me the news about whether I'd made the big grade. And I hadn't. And I had this state of mind to ask him at the time, what did he think I should do? And he's a wily Welshman who had an answer to everything. And he said to me, very honestly, he said, look, what I see you doing is trying to wait for us to make you up to this position. You're kind of playing the hierarchy and expecting this thing, this title. He said, it's not really what it's cracked up to be. And when you get to it, you realise how hard it is. He said, what I'd advise you to do is just go out there and be more of who you are, and to act like you are a partner, and to do more risky stuff. And if you do that, we'll have no choice but to make you partner. And that's kind of the subject for my next book, which is, it comes into a much wider discussion of where you see power, whether you see it in the hierarchy or whether you see it in your own possibility. And I've kind of spent the rest of my life trying to live up to that question. So it's not a piece of advice I've routinely followed. It's more a challenge, how can you be more of who you are and take more risks rather than expecting someone to hand you something?
Yeah.
How often do we wait around waiting for that promotion when really when we get it, then is when the journey really starts. Why not start doing the stuff now? I guess that's a piece of advice that's really changed me, and that I constantly look at and think, am I living up to that? Because a lot of the time I won't be.
No.
Because it's really tough. I mean, it's really scary to go and do these things.
Yeah.
So I'm still hoping that I'm living a good answer to that piece of advice. And often I'm not. And I ask myself, why not? What am I scared of?
So, Izzy, who have you got for us next?
We've got two pieces of wonderful advice. These are two of my favourites, actually. The first one is from a client perspective, from Katie Pattison, who joined us in 2017.
Oh, Katie was great.
December. That's right. And the next piece of advice is from Tony Spong, who is from the intermediary, the AAR.
Ah, yes, Tony and his brilliant pitching advice. Okay, let's have a listen.
Well, I'm married to a Yorkshireman who's a man of very few words.
Right.
Which sometimes is very frustrating for someone like me because I'm a chatterbox. And he's always said to me, you've got two of these, those are my ears I'm pointing at, and one of those. Can you get them in the right order? And I think it's true. And as I've got older, I have realised how powerful it is to just listen to what people are saying, and actually even listen to what they're not saying, both in terms of your own conversations or possibly conflicts and trying to get your own way within a marketing strategy or something internally, or even when you're being pitched to. Just listen.
Yeah.
And let the agency tell you what they're going to do for you. And don't jump in and interrupt. And I find I'm much more broad-minded for listening. I get opened up to all sorts of other ideas, things that I didn't think were in the plan and suddenly are. So I do think everyone could benefit from chatting less and listening more.
That's particularly good advice, I think, for agencies in a new business scenario, where I think certainly there can be a tendency when nerves kick in to go in and just keep talking.
Yeah.
And have you experienced those sort of first agency
Yes.
meetings where someone comes in and...
Yes.
just doesn't stop talking.
I think sometimes that will happen where you have maybe an account director and you then have the art director there and they're segueing between one part of their presentation, maybe the strategic kind of overview piece, and then the warming people up and getting them excited about what the creative solution might be. And sometimes it will go a bit pear-shaped somewhere in between the two. Maybe the account manager will oversell it and not let the creative have its time and have that proper airing. So that does sometimes happen. And also I think sometimes with a junior, and that's not me saying, gosh, don't bring juniors to pitches, because everyone has to learn. But maybe a bit of rehearsal in advance to really keep them to script would help sometimes. And the only other piece of advice I've got, which agencies should know really, is that we have budgets as marketeers, as you know, as a client. I have a budget. I need to spend the money. So my other piece of advice is, you know, when you know that this is quite a big project, don't be afraid of the money. I have to spend it. If I don't spend it, I won't get it again the following year.
Interesting.
So there is something to be said for that. If you really believe in what it is you're delivering and you've done all your costings in a way that you genuinely don't think you're fleecing the client, but it is worth the money, the client will believe that too, I suspect. And don't be afraid of that.
I remember in my first agency, the one piece of advice was, which has always stuck with me actually, which is there'll be a moment in this meeting where there is a silence. Don't fill the silence. So it's an old-fashioned sales technique around make the client blink first. Hold your nerve, I guess is what it's saying. Trust in what you've pitched. Don't sell after the pitch, which I think is what the textbooks and coaching says. And it hit me then. And I laughed inwardly because, of course, previously this was my first agency, so I'd been a client and was fully aware of the technique that had been now played on me. And I smiled knowingly. And it worked a treat. I was in one of the first pitches I was in, and the agency team presented, and my job was literally pouring coffee and things like that. And they said, it'll go quiet, Tony, and whatever you do, don't say a word or we'll fire you, basically. And I was biting my lip and everything else. And it worked. And the client went, yep. That's good, we'll do that. Yeah. And it's what. So that's always stuck with me. And I think it manifests itself in slightly different ways, but the principle is still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say your piece and then
shut up.
Let's shut up.
Yes, I was taught he who speaks first loses in my sales training back in the day. But it is really powerful. If you can master it, it's quite difficult to do.
It is very difficult.
So next up, we've got a bit of advice from someone's mum, which is always nice. We had Alex and Dan from Future Factory to talk about lead generation. And Dan gave us some fantastic advice from his mum, Maureen.
Thank you, Maureen.
Is there a piece of advice that you've been given that's really stuck?
Yeah, from my mum, actually.
Oh, brilliant.
From Maureen. Her and my dad ran a business together for a long time, and she always used to say that it's easy to be busy, but it's not easy to be busy making money.
Oh.
So we have that running through our business as well. You know, you can think about, you know, the times that actually you're just almost treading water. You just got to make sure that you're super pointed and super focused. When it comes to new business, that's absolutely true.
Too easy to be a busy fool. Good advice, Maureen.
Yeah,
Thanks for that. And we're also going to hear from Robert Kelsey. Now, Robert runs a PR agency, but he's also a bit of a productivity expert. So we got him in to talk about productivity, and he's got a fabulous bit of advice too. Let's have a listen.
Someone gave me a very good piece of advice recently. We were struggling a bit in the last quarter of last year. Things were slightly going wrong. Nothing too major, but it was starting to worry me. And someone that had created an agency and sold it and created another one said to me, forget about the small stuff. Forget about the small clients and doing the fiddly bits. He said, think about growing the big accounts. He said, focus on the big names and the big accounts and try and grow them, farm them. So forget about anything too small and bitty that you think might head you in a different direction, etc. Just focus on the accounts you've got now and try and grow them. And I did this. I took the advice, and we've already, with one of our major banks, we've doubled the amount we do with them. And it's made up not only for some of the smaller stuff that we lost, it's more than made up for it. And also, it's going to be there the next year, because that's how big accounts plan. And I thought it was absolutely transformative. And actually, it was probably obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me because of just the way I operate and what goes on in my head. And also because it wasn't obvious to someone with my insecurities, because losing any account is actually a disaster. It's a personal failure. Yeah. And the last thing you want is someone to tell you, remind you of what a personal failure you are. And so you're triggered by it. But of course, that I just thought was sort of slightly transformative for me, was a bit of advice.
So next up, I'm thinking about earlier this year, Izzy, and we did our very first transatlantic episode.
Yeah.
It was the brilliant David C. Baker. So for anybody that didn't listen to that episode, go back and find it. He is a genius on agency positioning. But here he gives us his best bit of advice.
To be fair, everything he said was a great piece of advice. But
It's a super episode, and his book as well.
In the early 2000s, I was going through this program called the Strategic Coach, and I've encouraged many of my clients to go through it as well. And some of my fellow advisors have gone through it as well. And they had this exercise that I thought was a waste of time. It felt like a filler sort of exercise, and it was around what they called your unique ability, where you wrote 40 people essentially and said, without any of them comparing notes with each other, tell me what David's unique ability is. And you get all of these answers from friends and clients and family members and so on. And you start to see this striking similarity between the answers. And it gives you this confidence that, oh, wow, I do stand for something. There's something that I'm really good at. Now that kind of arms me. It gives me the confidence to aim for a career that uses my unique ability. And so as I've understood where I'm good, and by definition, that means there are a lot of things I'm not very good at, it's given me the courage and the direction to choose specific directions for my business and to say, no, I'm interested in that, and I know you want me to do that, but that is not a fit for who I am. So I'm just going to have to say no. And life is full of those tough choices. So I would say that's one of the most influential things. But honestly, there are thousands of things. I am a voracious reader, listener. There's so many things that I pick up and furiously just scribble down because I know it's going to be a thought that's going to be formative for me. But that's one of those things that I think kind of keeps touching me. It keeps nudging me forward. It's something that's been very influential.
And we're also going to hear from Alex Blyth from Red Setter. So Alex and Claire joined us to talk about thought leadership. They are a new business and PR agency specifically for creative businesses, and they're really fantastic. They have a whole team dedicated to thought leadership and PR for agencies. So Alex gave us his best piece of advice too.
I think in one of my first jobs, in the first week, it was a sales job. And I was given that classic thing of sell me this pencil.
Oh, yes.
And so I started saying, this pencil's amazing.
I had that for a while.
Exactly that. And then just turning that on its head. So why do you need a pencil? All that sort of thing. If you want to write something, what are you going to do?
Yes.
And I think that's just informed how I've approached every part of my career, from that new business role through the journalism that I've done for many years through to the PR and editorial work that I do at Red Setter now.
We're halfway through the mince pies. There's a whole bag of chocolate coins gone already.
Demolished.
See who we got next.
We have got Katz Kiely, technologist and culture specialist, and Sara Stark, head of marketing and creative at Dishoom.
She was another client perspective.
She was. She joined us for Small Spark Theory Live, which
we're going to do again, aren't we?
We're going to do it again.
I think I remember saying that night, it was brilliant. Thank goodness it's over.
Yeah.
Because we won't do it again. But we're going to do it again,
I knew
aren't
you'd
we?
change your mind.
Yeah, you're such a bully.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will be doing another live recording, probably late spring, early summer again, I think. That kind of worked quite well. So look out in the new year for more news of that. In the meantime, here's Katz and Sarah.
So I suppose the best advice I've ever been given is, and I fully intend when I get my new office to get this written in neon signs, 100% me and the best I can be. By which I mean, just be the person you are, because people will pick it up if you're not being who you are. And that feeling of insincerity will lose your sales.
I felt really bad that I couldn't think of a specific piece of advice, because I know I've been given loads. But I think one thing as a sort of overall principle is that I've had the benefit of managers who gave me loads and loads of confidence and who really believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, to be honest. And they sort of pushed me beyond my boundaries and expected me and, you know, kind of encouraged me to do things that I didn't think I could. And that for me has been, you know, hugely beneficial in my career, and a great learning for me as well, is that when someone says they can't do something, doesn't mean they can't. And yeah, so that really helped me just to learn to just trust the creative process, trust the process in general, and my ability to deliver it and to bring in the right people at the right times when I needed them, which was pretty scary when you're a control freak. But I think it's okay to fail, and I think building a culture where you have the freedom to fail is also really important in a creative environment. So, you know, if you can build that culture, you know, first of all in yourself, but then within the organisation, then it will give you and your team the freedom to experiment, the freedom to be more creative, and ultimately that will open up doors as well.
I think that's a real Richard Branson thing as well, isn't it, about creating a culture where failure is okay. And I think I remember reading a quote of his where he said that if somebody fails and you fire them, then all of the learnings they get from failing, their next employer is going to benefit from that. Whereas if you keep them in the business, then you will benefit from the learnings that come from the failure, because it's through failing that you learn. So, yeah, interesting. Now, I really want to give a special mention to Jemima Monies here. We asked Jemima to come and join us. Jemima is, or should I say was, head of new business and PR at Adam and Eve. And we asked her to come and talk to us because she's been kind of campaigning for the role of new business in agencies to get a bit more attention and give more profile to new business people in agencies. Do you think it's a coincidence that just after that recording, she got promoted?
What a coincidence.
She's now Deputy MD. And since then, I think Adam and Eve have won the Campaign Agency of the Year for 5th year in a row. I think
so.
So she knows what she's talking about. Let's have a listen to her advice.
Just a general piece of advice is don't be afraid to move around the industry until you find an agency that you want to call home. I don't mean literally every month, but you know, when you're young, do get a sense for the small agencies and the big agencies, because you do learn a lot in doing that. And then hopefully you'll finally find somewhere that you want to sort of bed yourself in for a while.
Yeah. Because it is about the combination of people that makes it possible.
Exactly.
The funny thing is, when you ask people the question, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given, a lot of the answers kind of, they were brilliant answers, but every now and again, we had something that took us a little bit by surprise. Blair Enns, we're talking about you. I'm not going to say anything else. Just have a listen to these two.
The best life advice that I've ever been given was by a lawyer who said never break more than one law at a time.
Okay.
So if you have a body in the trunk or the boot of the car, then stop and fix the burned out headlight.
Wow, that's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, that lawyer went to jail for tax evasion. But that's advice I give my kids. In the business, I've received so much good advice. I can't, if I could pass on good advice to kind of aspiring entrepreneurs that's at the root of business success, I would say marry well.
Okay.
A friend of mine pointed this out to me a while ago. To one of her kids was kind of making an observation about what he perceived as my success, and she said, "Well, you can see it's obvious. It's look at who he married." And I never thought of it that way, but that was a few years ago, and I've thought about it a lot since. And my wife is also my business partner, and that's not a requirement, but we work very well together. We divide responsibilities along the different lines. You know, in building a business, I've had just the complete support of somebody who loves me unconditionally, but has been very supportive of like what it takes to build a business, of an entrepreneurial life. And I would say choose your partners wisely, your business partners, your life partners. It makes everything so much easier.
Okay, you heard it here first, people. Go out there, marry well, marry well. Good.
Not what you were expecting to hear on this podcast today, were you?
Not at all. And I'd like everybody just to come back and tell us how that goes. We've got a competition for you. It's Christmas after all, and so in true Small Spark Theory style, we are going to be giving away a little gift. So we would love you to join in on Twitter and tell us what are the best pieces of advice that you've been given. In fact, we're going to do a little bit like, do you ever listen to Saturday Live on Radio 4? They have inheritance tracks. So it's the track that you have inherited and then the track that you would like to pass on.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's a song.
I think that's nice.
So listeners, you can either tell us the best piece of advice that you've ever been given, or in inheritance track style, you could tell us the best piece of advice that you would like to pass on.
Wonderful.
So,
and how do I do that, Lucy?
You can do that on Twitter at Gunpowder Tweets using the hashtag Small Spark Theory. And the prize is, we're going to hark back all the way to our very first episode where we gave away a 15-minute egg timer. And the idea is that you can use this to carve out 15 minutes in the day just to focus on your business. So whether that's getting on LinkedIn, reconnecting with people that you've forgotten about, remembering to connect with people that you met and you didn't follow up with at the time, getting back in touch with somebody that you should probably meet up with again and have a coffee. Any of those things, it's the gift of time.
We've got news.
We have indeed. So we have a brand new way to access Small Spark Theory coming to you in the new year. It's a kind of a super duper new business tool that's just going to make your life so much easier. I can't tell you too much about it right now, but watch out, stay tuned, and we're going to be announcing more about it in the new year and all the details of how you can get involved. But it's exciting times. And finally, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back again in the new year. Thanks to everyone who's left those brilliant stars and reviews on iTunes. Keep doing that.
Keep them coming.
Keep them coming. And we will see you again in 2019 with some cracking new episodes and more news. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Have fun.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Lovely, lovely.
You have been listening to Small Spark Theory, brought to you by Gunpowder Consulting. Join in the conversation on Twitter at Gunpowder Tweets, hashtag Small Spark Theory. The podcast is created and hosted by me, Lucy Mann. Our editor is Claire Aban, and our producer is Isabel Jarvis. Music is provided by Juke Deck, available at jukedeck.com. For more information and to download further episodes, head to our blog at gunpowderconsulting.com. And if you like what you hear, head to iTunes and leave us a star.